for the House Republican Caucus. With us today on the House side are House Republican Leader J.T. Wilcox from the 2nd District and Assistant Floor Leader Chris Corey from the 14th District. And from the Senate, we have Senate Republican Leader John Braun of the 20th Legislative District, Caucus Chair Ann Rivers of the 18th District, and Floor Leader Shelley Short of the 7th District, who will need to leave right at 12:30 today to go to committee. So with that, I will turn it over to Representative Wilcox.
Well, thank you very much, John, and it's good to see all of you. I'm hoping that before too long we'll hit a phase that allows us to actually be in the same room, and I miss that, honestly. Looking back on the last week of floor action, I think I'll start at the end. It ended, I think, on something of a high note when you saw something that Drew Stokesbury has put a great amount of effort into it. As you know, Representative Stokesbury is our House Republican budget lead, and he wrote one of the only budgets ever that includes funding for the working families tax credit. And we were happy to be working on that together with the other side. As you know, that was established about 12 years ago, never ever funded by Democratic budgets. And I think the fact that Republicans went ahead to provide a significant tax break for working families who we largely represent made a big impact and probably provided the political push that was required to actually pass that. We have some major concerns about things that didn't pass as well. As you know, we've offered many opportunities to vote on bills that would involve the legislature in the governor's emergency decisions, and I am quite concerned that we're going to leave this regular session in exactly the same place that we left the last one, with the government in the hands of just one person, and that's not the way that we are designed to conduct government in the state of Washington. We are also concerned with the very slow pace of opening, and all you have to do is look at the statistics that are published in the Department of Health dashboard to see that although for a couple of days this week it looked like we might have reached a plateau, cases are falling off a cliff again in a good way, and you're seeing some of the lowest hospital loads that you've seen in the last year. So we are still very committed to pushing both the reopening of the economy in a safe way and a accelerated reopening of schools, because those things are related. I've probably covered enough, and I'll give it back to John to move on.
Senator Braun.
All right. Well, thank you, John and JT. So I'll just hit a few wave tops, things that we continue to push on. The reopening. The Republicans introduced a plan for what I think is a thoughtful reopening, first to 50% and then to 100% if the data continues to go in the direction it has been going for a number of weeks now, while we continue to wait for the governor to tell us what's next after almost 2 months of everybody being in phase 2. Well, I should say that 1 month for the whole state, about six and a half weeks for the rest. So we continue to push for getting our children back in schools for in-person learning. That is happening broadly in most of the districts we represent, but still 60-70% of the students haven't been in the classroom for over a year. And we're seeing a disproportionate impact on historically disadvantaged children as a result of that. We need to get that fixed. I'd like to kind of double tap on one of the things that JT mentioned, because we get more and more worried about this. We're now over halfway through the session, and we've done nothing on emergency powers reform. We are on a very clear path towards what we had lived through the 10 months before this session, where the governor is in a position of single responsibility for the government of the state of Washington. I don't think that should be acceptable, regardless of your party, and we need to push on that and get something done prior to leaving session. It's coming up pretty quickly. lots of things we could talk about that happened and passed off the Senate floor over the last 2 weeks. Happy to take questions on that. Looking forward a little bit. It's budget time. As JT mentioned, the House and the Senate both rolled out, balanced budgets with no new revenue, significant investments in things that are important to the people of Washington. We did that several weeks ago. They demonstrate very clearly that it can be done. We fully expect to get a significant increase in the revenue forecast in the very near future. And of course, the stimulus package in DC passed and is going to bring enormous additional funding to the state. So it's kind of, a little bit surreal that here we are in the middle of a worldwide pandemic, and we're in the best budget situation I think anybody could have imagined. And we need to be no longer worried about, where do we find additional funding? We need to be worried about how we spend what we have so that we don't create a gigantic bow wave in the future. So I am hopeful that the majorities will involve us in that, and it'll be bipartisan effort, and it'll be one-time expenditures, and especially in infrastructure that will help the state long-term, and we don't create a bow wave. But that's coming up in our near future. And like I said, we look forward to, we hope, being involved in that conversation. So with that, I'll turn it back to John Handy to open it up for questions.
All right. We will start with Rachel LaCourte of the Associated Press.
Hi, good afternoon. As it relates to the police reform bills that are moving forward, are there areas of concern that you have, and are there areas where your caucuses hope to make changes?
Well, a number of those started in the House, and as a floor leader, Representative Corey, has had a lot more to do with the policy than I have. So I'd like to kick it over to him to share his thoughts, and I may add something afterwards.
Yeah, thank you, JT. So it was a very challenging couple of weeks as we dealt with a number of very complex and meticulous police reform bills. I will say that the lead sponsor on some of those worked really hard with members of my caucus, including my seatmate, Representative Mossbrucker, to try to find ways to make it more fair and equitable for all the parties involved. We're still not there yet. We've made a number of what we believe are positive changes to these bills in terms of really understanding what our law enforcement officers and our community members are facing so that they are more, I guess for lack of a better term, palatable. But there still are significant concerns that we are putting some undue burdens on law enforcement officers that won't be tenable and really at the end of the day won't make our community safer. So we'll continue to push for common sense reform that is fair to both our communities as well as for law enforcement.
Thanks, Chris. And I'll just add, we are doing everything that we can to do two things. Preserve the tools that are necessary for the police to keep us safe, and at the same time, make it as unlikely as possible that they can be misused. And I think in this case, the minority, us, the political minority, is doing our job in looking at bills that started out maybe a little aspirational. And I think we're working in concert with the most careful members of the majority party to modify these bills so that they actually can accomplish positive safety. And they've moved on a number of these. The one that hasn't yet in a big way has been the one involving independent review. It's very large and bureaucratic, and perhaps the place to work on that is the Senate. And they've had some policing bills as well.
Yeah, I guess I would just say we've had a few policing bills. We've seen a lot come from the House. I think the decertification bill was the largest bill we had. There's a lot of work here. I mean, I would start with a basis statement that nobody, doesn't matter your politics, in my opinion, wants to live in a world where the color of your skin dictates whether you're arrested or brutalized or convicted or incarcerated. That's just unacceptable no matter what. Now, how we get there in a way that is both effective and understands the difference between what we do right now and what we do wrong. And as JT said, there are many tools we use that are useful in maintaining law and order. We got to make sure they're used properly and not misused. and lead to these terrible outcomes. But I think we're going to see a lot more on the Senate side coming up, but we saw some, I think it's 50-51 early on. And while we didn't, many of us didn't ultimately vote for that, we appreciate the work. We just think it went either too far or in some cases in the wrong direction. Committed to the process, but not completely happy with the output so far.
Do you have a follow-up, Rachel?
I do, on a separate topic, going back to Senator Braun's comments about needing to fix things as it relates to school returns. The governor said he doesn't have the legal authority to reopen schools. So my question to you is there language in state law that you believe indicates otherwise? And if not, what else do you think he should be doing?
I had this conversation with the governor, and as much as we have disagreed on proclamations, and as much as I would like him to have legal authority to order schools back in person, I ultimately came to the conclusion that he is right on that issue. But along those lines, that's why Linda Wilson dropped the bill that would make just that the case, that schools can't be out of in person for more than 10 days unless ordered by the governor, the Secretary of Health, or the local health department. So flip it on its head from where it is right now so that he would have the authority to do that. This is, frankly, my big frustration. I agree with the governor doesn't have authority, but the legislature could give him that authority today. All we have to do is get the majorities to stop, sitting on the sidelines and waiting for something else to happen. We should be acting. Unquestionably, the legislature should be acting on this issue.
Well, Rachel, I'd just like to follow up. There have been over the past year numerous mixed messages coming from the governor, coming from Chris Reichdahl, and even the federal government at times over what the schools should be expected to do. And those conversations started just right as schools were reopening last August. And the word that I get now is schools are comfortable. They've got, at least in my district, they have students in person. They've had a few cases here and there, not related to school transmission. They're working really hard at all of the good hygiene things that make sense. Their biggest challenge right now is the 6-foot rule. They want to get our students back in school. They know that they are having both educational and emotional challenges. And when you look at the CDC, they use 6 feet as a guide, but or what's feasible. But by and large, there's been a lot of mixed messages from the top. And if you're that school board member or you're that superintendent, the potential for liability is very strong, and so then there are people that want their students back in school, but they're unsure of what that impact's going to be. So I think Senator Wilson's bill deals with that, and I think it's a positive piece of legislation that says, look, we are going to work in concert with our local health departments. This is not the legislature coming up on top of school districts to tell them how to do it. It's just saying, go do it, feel comfortable with doing it, work with your local health jurisdictions to get it done, and identify all of the safety things that you need to do. And I'm confident that this would work in our communities.
And Rachel, I'd like to add something in as well. I think that the governor deserves praise for modifying the vaccine schedule to make sure that teachers get vaccinated, so that if they have any concern about being in that public setting, that they have access to the vaccine, which should not be construed as we're forcing teachers to be vaccinated. But for those teachers who have a real concern about COVID, making sure that they're among the first to be vaccinated was a very wise choice.
Quick comment, Representative Stokesbury again drafted an amendment to the LEA bill that required that schools be back in a fairly modest way at the beginning of next year, since there's been talk of schools that are reluctant to even commit to that. And I think it was a modest attempt, because that's what it took to get the bill accepted by the other side. We're going to be looking for more amendment opportunities to tie dollars going to schools to their performance in terms of providing the maximum opportunity for kids to get learning in person. That is the one thing that the minority party can consistently do, regardless of the governor or the desires of the majority party.
All right, next we'll go to Austin Jenkins of Northwest News Network.
Thank you. Regarding the budget and what comes next, what are your thoughts at this point on the need to tap the rainy day fund? Will that be necessary, or do you think now that perhaps it could be left untouched?
No question. Based on what we expect to get from the stimulus package, in my mind, no question we could leave it untouched or largely untouched. There's, like I said before, there is it's like it's raining money out there, and we should be mindful that what has happened to us in the last year could very well happen to us again, next year or or later this year. So we have the ability to leave the rainy day account fullish, that we should do it.
Yeah, I'd like to add, if I can, as one of the assistant rankings on appropriations, one of the concerns I'm going to have is how we shuffle around money, to say. And what I mean by that is, not taking either Fed monies or general state fund dollars and putting them into larger programs that then force us to need to use the rainy day fund. I think that's important. Those rainy day funds are obviously critical to making sure continuity of government and running underlying priorities for us. So ensuring that we're not doing anything that will, rearrange the deck chairs in a way that makes it look like we need to use it. That's going to be a big concern for myself and others on appropriations.
And Austin, this is an opportunity for everybody to show what their priorities are too. The Fed dollars coming down are immense. We've got things that have gotten all kinds of lip service over the years in terms of priority. And if we don't use those dollars for something like fixing culverts in a big way, maybe helping local governments comply with the terms of their lawsuit. Obviously, if you care about small business, you absolutely have to pour money into backfilling the Employment Security Trust Fund. There's going to be a huge opportunity for people to express their priorities here. And those are just a couple of the things that they absolutely should be putting money into.
Austin, do you have a follow-up?
Just briefly, I know that the remote session, you don't relish it, but I'm wondering just how it's working, at least technically. And I've also noticed that in Oregon, it seems like there's a lot of tension right now between majority Democrats and minority Republicans in that legislature. I think there's even been some walkouts and maybe some slow walking some stuff. And I'm just curious if and how the relationship here is a little bit different with the majority party between your caucuses and their caucuses.
Okay, so I'll go first. I would say you got it right. We are not particularly enamored of the remote session, virtual work. And as frankly, as the COVID situation gets better and better, I wonder more and more why we are continuing to do it. That said, we are making it work, and we're committed to making it work and working in good faith. We've had some technical challenges. I mean, there's a few every day, it seems like, but we're working through them, I think, in a reasonable way. I do have some concerns about kind of the type of legislation that is going through the legislature. It seems it's a lot more one-sided than it's been in the past, and I think that may have something to do with a lack of transparency in the process, the lack of access in the process. It may also have to do with the fact that we just don't see each other in person as much, so it's hard to have those short conversations that lead to, simple fixes to bills to make them, more representative of the whole state. So it's a complicated issue. I would say broadly, we've had a pretty good relationship, certainly a functional and effective relationship with the majority. We very clearly disagree on policy outcomes. There should be no question about that. But they have been, it's a courteous and civil, respectful relationship, as you would expect. And I So in that way, I'm appreciative and hopeful that we'll continue to work in the best interests of the state of Washington, even where we vigorously disagree on the policy outcomes.
Austin, oh, go ahead.
Austin, I'd like to add that something that's really missing is the ability to just walk up to a colleague on the floor and ask them, oh my gosh, what are we going to do about State v. Blake? This is really a problem that we need to address. Those conversations are not happening right now. And that's very problematic as we're starting to see the fruits of that particular decision by the Supreme Court rot on the ground. But so I would add that that's very problematic. We've had a great working relationship, but really it can only be truly great when you can actually have those kinds of conversations.
Well, I just follow up, it's impact and negotiations, the ability to negotiate. You know, are those bills as good as they're going to get? It's all been impacted that way. And I think when there are dust ups on the floor, the ability to not let those fester and to be able to have those face-to-face conversations, which is part of what we do as a civil society, you know, as we run into challenges, that has been particularly challenged at times this session. So it's just, it is what it is, but certainly hope it's the only one of its kind.
I've got a very major concern with this, that the lack of human contact and socialization empowers caucus groupthink. And that is not a good thing. That doesn't lead to balance. And I think it also can lead even to caucuses becoming more extreme. One more reason why I think the number one thing facing us is not necessarily legislation right now. It is doing everything we can to be sure that the downsides of our reaction to COVID don't become a habit and don't become the new normal. We've got to fight back to a better normal than the one that we have right now.
Yeah, and just to add, you know, as part of the floor team here, it does make working with both sides as well as your own side considerably trickier. You can't have, again, quick sidebar conversations. You can't hash things out as efficiently as you can in a caucus. Outside of that, just to add one aspect to that, Austin, if you're looking for a silver lining here, I think for those of us in rural districts on the other side of the mountain, the ability for some of our constituents to be able to engage on bills that directly impact them, that's one positive I'm going to try to take out of this. And I think going forward, even when we are back in session, maybe having some of these digital tools that we've developed as a legislature remain in place so that people, we're a big state geographically, and make sure that people who want to have their voices heard can. So while I agree it's tense, I think that we should be able to take out some positives from this and hopefully move it forward to make it better for citizens to engage with us in the future.
All right, next we'll go to Sarah Gensler of McClatchy.
Thanks, John. This is for Senator Braun. We saw the House pass the Working Families Tax Exemption Bill on a broadly bipartisan basis yesterday. Do you believe that your caucus will have the same level of support for that bill in its current form?
I'm sorry, Sarah, I missed which bill you're talking to. I didn't hear that part.
Sorry about that. It's the Working Families Tax Exemption Bill that expands it, that passed off the floor in the House yesterday.
Yeah, I think it's absolutely possible. I mean, if you look at both, just like the budget the House Republicans put together, the budget the Senate Republicans put together, fully funded the Working Families Tax Credit. So this is something that I am absolutely on the same page as Representative Stokesbury and Representative Wilcox. This is a true way to bring tax reform to the state of Washington, as opposed to just raising taxes in other places. We actually give some tax relief to working families, struggling families around the state. And as was said earlier, these are the families most of us represent in rural Washington. So it's the right thing to do. I think it'll be very broadly supported in the Senate.
Did you have a follow-up, sir?
Yes, and you mentioned the Senate budget proposal. So the exemption was funded in that, but it looks like not to the level that would be required for the exemptions expansion that's in the House bill. So do you think that you could find that funding without a new source of revenue, or does that change with the expansion?
Well, you might have me on a technicality. I haven't studied the House bill in detail. So my answer was, are we philosophically supportive of the working families tax credit? Absolutely. Are all the policies between the two chambers lined up? Nope, they never are, regardless of your politics. I'm very confident we can find the money to pay for that without additional revenue. Absolutely. I mean, we are in an enormously good position from a revenue standpoint. We're about to get a new revenue forecast, which all indications are will improve that measurably. We also have significant additional money coming to us from the stimulus package. As I said earlier, I don't think the issue is being able to fund key investments like that. The issue is making sure we choose them wisely so that they don't create a bow wave we can't afford in the future. But this is one I think we can afford in the future.
Thank you.
All right, next we'll go to Jerry Cornfield of the Herald. Jerry may have left. Next we'll go to Hannah Scott of Cairo Radio.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. I have kind of broad questions. We talked a lot about police accountability bills that have been moving through. There's also been a lot of criminal justice reform bills taking aim at the 3 strikes law that are still moving through, and some of our sexually violent predators. I'm wondering if anybody has any thoughts on those they can share.
Well, I think that we're going way, way, way too far into the realm of theory and ideology. And you didn't mention one other. I know you're aware that we need a bill to fix the situation that the Supreme Court left us in, where drug possession of even fentanyl now is not illegal and has crippled the ability of people to, the police, any kind of authority to deal with drugs. And there was an incident that was just brought up. A hit and run driver killed a mother and children, I think, in Puyallup recently, someone totally incapacitated. And the police were unable even to give pursuit of that person going 100 miles an hour, who cost lives. So this is a fix that we absolutely have to do. We want the Democrats to join us doing that because the minority can't pass a bill. And we want to keep talking about how can we, in the most rational possible way, do criminal justice reform, because it's clear that there have been injustices in the past, but you don't throw everything out in order to do that, because that means that the test subjects are the people of Washington. And, you know, we are just as responsible for the mistakes that we make in the legislature by, you know, decriminalizing and depolicing as we are for the injustices that get sometimes perpetrated by the justice system.
You know, and Hannah, one of the things that some of the prime sponsors of these bills have used as a reason is access to services, so that these individuals can make their way into society. And look, every one of us want these individuals to be successful when they have served their time. The big key thing in this whole thing, nothing prevents them from getting those services inside of incarceration. And yet the reason for these bills is the necessity of getting them access to services and the reason for re-entry earlier. But what we are doing is compounding a very serious situation of a number, I would just call a perfect storm, if you will, with the lack of, just very low numbers of per capita numbers of police officers in our communities, the challenge of major changes to the structure of policing. It doesn't mean for or against, but you are significantly altering that structure. How many people may want to become police officers? Then you couple that with, people coming into, early, out into society. You mentioned the sexual violent predator legislation. All of those things are going to have significant impacts on safety of both them as individuals and our communities, and the ability of our local governments to handle. You know, we just heard a bill in House local government and housing and local government, not a bad bill, but it seeks to give you know, flexibility in how local governments spend their taxing authority. Well, guess what? They want to take criminal justice authority and start spending it in other ways. You know, housing needs are absolutely there, but do we go that direction? And so there are a number of things that are really setting up, you know, a very bad situation when you look at them all together.
And I would add in on the sexually violent predators, what we know is that before a sexually violent predator is caught, they actually statistically have likely committed a minimum of 5 attacks, and then they get caught. Here's the other thing that we know. Upon release, there is a preponderance that they will once again reoffend. So I think that we have to stop taking a one-size-fits-all approach to these individuals, because there's something else that's going on there. And, you know, I've heard from so many victims lately about when do I matter? When does what happened to me matter? What about my life? And so when the pendulum swings so far, then you are creating another group of people who are really hurt by what's happening. In fact, they're re-hurt. And this seems to be a perspective that is lacking right now in Olympia. And I hope that we can get back there.
Anna, did you have a follow-up? Oh, we may have lost Hannah. Okay, the last question comes from Christine Pei of King TV. And that question is Washington ready to enter phase 3 of reopening, and why? This would mean 50% capacity for businesses. What has the sentiment from the business community been?
Hi, I'm sorry if I could just jump in there. I wasn't sure if I could speak. I know that you had touched on this earlier when we started this, and you did elaborate more on schools reopening, but has there been kind of any reaction from the business community from your areas in terms of how much they're in pain, how eager they are, or are they okay with the current phase, us being within 25% indoor capacity? Just what is the attitude out there?
Well, absolutely, we're ready for 50%. And, you know, the attitude would somewhat depend on whether your business is affected by the 25% limit at this point. Businesses that are up and running have a sense of solidarity with the businesses that are not, but the ones that feel the crisis are the ones who are being crippled by 25%. Yet at the same time, have put an immense amount of effort into how can we operate safely. And drive into any town or city and you will see structures and all kinds of adjustments, because people sincerely want to keep their patrons safe. Of course, we should never even consider that. You know, I would also say that, you know, you're unlikely to see business resistance because they can always choose their own limitations. If a business owner feels like they've got a unique situation that is more hazardous, or if they just feel that it would be safer for them to say at whatever level they deem to be appropriate, they can do that. No one's forcing them. We are wanting to give more people the option to quickly advance as safely as possible.
Yeah, no question about that. The businesses are unified regardless of the impact of the restrictions and the desire to open back up. I personally have enormous confidence that they will not just open back up to 50 or hopefully eventually to 100% responsibly. I mean, that's the thing. We didn't just start this yesterday. We've been at it for a year. We know a lot more than we did a year ago, and we know how to stay safe. And frankly, I trust Washingtonians in businesses and other places to make good decisions for themselves, for their families, their neighbors, their customers, their employees. We can do this right. And there's a sense of frustration that right now and for several weeks now, we don't even know what's next. It's just a void. And for that reason, we introduced what we thought was a thoughtful, careful plan to get us down that road a little bit further. And we've got a lot of positive response from that. That people are interested in knowing what comes next. What can they do to help us move forward and get back to something closer to normal in a safe way, of course.
Yeah, and I would just add to that. I know I talked to a lot of my local small businesses, and not only are they ready for that 50%, but one thing that I think they would appreciate from the governor, as well as Olympia more broadly here as a legislature, is some consistency. Obviously, we know that there are changes. We see different movements in the virus and spread and what's going on, but we've gone through so many different iterations of plans that this lack of consistency and ambiguity really hurts our small business owners. They're trying to do what's right, and if you keep changing the rules on them, you make it more and more difficult for them to operate successfully. And at this point, 50%, we're not even talking about them being successful. We're talking about them keeping their doors open, keeping their lights on, and keeping their employees paid. And so I think it's critical at this point. And again, to Senator Braun's point he brought up a minute ago, people can make good, healthy decisions for themselves, and we should trust them to do that. We are not here to nanny them, and nor should we. We've given them the right tools and resources. We've empowered some of our agencies to be able to assist in that and provide those guidelines and best practices. So now it's time that we go trust our businesses, our customers, our workers to go make the right decisions that are best for them and get out of their way.
Thank you.
Do you have a follow-up, Christine?
No, that's it. Thank you very much.
All right. Well, that's all the questions. Thank you, everyone. Appreciate it.